Welcome to Bible Prayers and Untold Stories, where every whisper verse is truth, and every story brings light to the soul. Let us journey through the sacred words and uncover the wisdom hidden in prayer. There are battles that are not loud. There are cracks that are not visible on the map. And there are battles not for thrones, but to keep the soul of the church from disappearing in the world, in the darkness of the corridors of power, where the candlelight is no longer enough to dispel doubts. A voice has been raised, not to divide, but to warn on a seemingly peaceful morning. The church has awakened to words that are no longer metaphors. A cardinal, a symbol of silence and tradition, called out to another cardinal, and from that moment, everything changed. This is not just a story about two people. This is a story about a church at a sacred crossroads. On one side, an invitation to adapt. On the other, a warning to return to the cross. And you, the one who is listening, will have to decide what is mercy, what is betrayal, and who is the true keeper of the light of faith. The 11th hour, when the church was torn in two, a journey to discover the roar of truth amid the silence of power. There are domes built to last, but nothing is eternal when truth begins to be compromised, and under the dome that seems the strongest, the first echoes of a rupture have been heard. The time will come when people will not endure sound doctrine, but according to their own desires they will accumulate for themselves teachers who will say whatever they please. 2 Timothy 4 verse 3. The church does not die from persecution. The church dies when the truth is diluted in the name of mercy, when polished words become a shadow that obscures the pure gospel. Why Cardinal Robert Sarah sits praying alone in a small chapel in Africa, rosary in hand, candlelight flickering, illuminating a face that has lived the cross without fanfare. While many choose the spotlight, there is one who chooses the darkness of the heart, a voice that does not follow public opinion, but echoes from the roots of tradition. Robert Sarah, the silent lion of the church. If we mislead souls, we will pay the price before the judgment seat. And then the silence is broken. No more metaphors. No more innuendo. Sarah calls out, not a heretic, but a sitting Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle. The event, like a stone touching a lake that is already turbulent. The Vatican is no longer silent. The corridors of power begin to whisper. The phones ring not in celebration, but in alarm. We are called to be pastors, not artists, not politicians. The words, like an arrow through the smoke of incense, not to destroy, but to awaken. But is the church ready to hear? St. Peter's Dome again. This time late in the afternoon, the darkness of night begins to fall. The bells ring, slowly, heavily. The shadows begin to move, while the world thinks the church is at peace. A spiritual earthquake is approaching, and this is only the beginning. Not everyone dares to speak, but there are moments silence is complicity, and when the silent lion roars, even the ancient walls begin to tremble. Mercy without truth is betrayal. It is not charity, it is surrender. It is not just criticism. It is a spiritual denunciation against a movement that is blurring the lines between the gospel and secular society. Sarah is not pointing at a person. She is pointing at a new approach that is quietly stripping away the spiritual pillars of faith. It is mercy without conversion. It is acceptance without truth. It is teachings that no longer have the power to save. Image of Cardinal Tagle. Smiling face on the international conference screen. Zen cuts Sarah's words from the interview. Cardinal Tagle is not my enemy, but his leadership has caused deep confusion. He teaches fragments of the gospel, clothed in mercy, but neglects the call for interchange. It was the first time in decades that a cardinal had dared to name another serving cardinal in the Vatican, and not for power, but for the soul of the church. The church is facing a war that has no clear name, but it can be felt in texts that no longer dare to say salvation, in sermons that avoid mentioning hell, but emphasize emotional safety. And Sarah put her finger on the wound that everyone saw, but no one dared to touch. Within 24 hours of the interview, Sarah's word became a living symbol of the quiet revival. Groups of lay people, young priests, single mothers, seminarians, etc., were silent. They began to act, not to protest, but to preserve the most sacred thing, the undiluted truth. When you blow the trumpet without warning, blood will be on your hands. Ezekiel 33, verse 6. And now, the trumpet has sounded, the lion has roared, and the church can no longer pretend to sleep. When the lion roars, the forest awakens. But there are times when a sigh cuts deeper than a shout. In the silence, a reply words begin to take shape, not through rebuttal, not through condemnation, but through a presence orchestrated by soft power. Cardinal Tagle steps onto the podium in Madrid, attending the Interfaith Conference, walking slowly, face calm but eyes shining with an unreadable restraint. The room is silent. Hundreds of people and millions of online eyes, and no mention of Sarah. No response to the interview. But Tagle's every word, arrows hidden in silk. He does not strike, but sets a trap for words. Headphone Tagle, quoted speech, quiet voice. In times of chaos, people want to shout. But God does not speak from a throne. He was crucified in silence. The church is not a fortress to be guarded. The church is a roof. The doors need be opened. Tagle said so. But for those who are thirsting for undiluted truth, it is not an answer, it is an evasion. You speak of a bridge, but where does that bridge lead? Tagle's advisors meet behind closed doors, voices urgent, eyes tense. An internal document asks Pope Leo XIV to assert Tagle's leadership. Behind the veil of decorum, a holy rage is brewing, not because of criticism, but because of being exposed so publicly. Close associates call Sarah a schismatic threat, but the more they try to control, the more cracks are exposed. Camera with flash image of a leaked email with the subject line, "We cannot let silence become weakness." The Vatican, once a unified entity, is now a battlefield of whispering and side-picking. On the surface, there are flowery speeches, but inside is a question no one dares to answer. If Sarah is wrong, why doesn't the church respond with the truth? And if you are right, who is betraying whom? The truth is not afraid of the light, but those who avoid the light sometimes talk a lot about peace. Tagle did not shout, but the world heard him. And the most dangerous thing was not what he said. It was what he did not say. A word can be ignored. A person can be isolated. But when faith is challenged and tradition is severed, what has been simmering can flare up. The church is no longer united. From the plains of Africa to the hills of Eastern Europe, Sarah's support became a pure flame, not because he was African, but because he spoke for them, for the faithful who were silenced by ambiguous documents, for the young priests who were marginalized for preaching about sin. A Nigerian archbishop said strongly, Cardinal Sarah does not speak only for Africa. He speaks for all those who have been forced to keep quiet so as not to offend. In the West, the church is beginning to split into two layers, the cautious pastors and the young people who are hungry for the truth. On social media, the clip of Sarah talking about mercy without truth has been shared millions of times. A young American wrote, "The church teaches us to be good, but forgets to teach us to be saints." Parishes in Brazil, Mexico, Argentina, priests read Sarah's words in their sermons. Some churches hold vigils to return to the cross. Camera with flash in the Philippines, Tagle's homeland. People still love him, but theology professors are starting to ask. Love does not mean silence. A theology professor wrote on Twitter, even in the place that once saw Tagle as the hope of Asia, cracks are beginning to appear. Images of the Vatican corridors, once a symbol of unity, now whispering, divided gazes. A leaked note from the Apostolic Nunciature in Poland warns of the risk of irreparable division without a clear response from the Pope. The Vatican, the heart is trembling. One side is pressing the Pope to speak out against Sarah. The other side whispers, "If you do, we will leave." Silence is no longer neutral. It is a choice, or waiting or calculating. No longer cardinals. No longer statements. Now the people of God speak, not through politics, but through mass prayer tears. A young priest in the United States said at the night mass, "If the Vatican does not guide us, we will follow the one who points to the cross." The Church is not divided by heresy, but by the very understanding of mercy, truth, and the cross. One side seeks to open the door to the world. The other side tries to keep the narrow door to salvation. And in the midst of two opposing currents, the souls of believers are being pulled in two directions. There are moments that cannot be delayed. There are forks in the road that cannot be turned back. And there are souls with only 1 hour to choose, light or darkness. The entire scene of St. Peter's Square is empty. The sky is covered with clouds. In the innermost rooms of the Vatican, the secret meetings continue, but no words are loud enough to hold the church together. Pope Leo XIV remains silent. Not a single document, not a single communique, not a single homily mentioning Sarah's name. But the silence, that silence is no longer peace. It is a sacred void where heaven and hell are looking on. Thousands of faithful pray the rosary in the middle of the night. From Manila to Warsaw, from Nairobi to Texas, a group of young people celebrate the rosary in the streets, holding up a picture of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. Underneath it is the inscription, "We choose the cross." When the powerful lose their voice, the little ones begin to speak. They have no pulpits, but they have faith, organized not by the Vatican, but by the desire to see a church return to its roots. Cardinal Sarah in Eucharistic adoration, the candlelight illuminating his austere face. His voice echoes in his last pastoral letter, published quietly but widely circulated. "I do not seek power. I do not seek fame. I only want to see the church kneeling before the cross, not bowing before the world. If I am exiled, thank you. If I am forgotten, thank you. But if my silence causes souls to perish, I cannot remain silent any longer." Those who seem to have no interest in theology, now they must choose between the unadulterated gospel or a more easily digestible version. And in that moment, faith is no longer a concept, but a confession, with tears, with isolation, with a courage that only the Holy Spirit can give. The church is no longer at a crossroads. The church is entering the 11th hour, an hour that the scriptures warned about, an hour that the prophets foretold, an hour where light and darkness no longer stand side by side, but must be discerned. The morning sun shines through the dome of St. Peter's. In the background, the sound of a small congregation praying the rosary. The words appear like the last breath of the film. When the shepherd refuses to speak, the sheep will follow the one who dares to cry out. And now, Cardinal Sarah cried out, and we, how shall we respond?